And welcome to my man cave. My channel is not an expert, so anything that you learn here is not the actual final word. You can explore and find things out on yourself, and maybe they'll work better than my ideas. But today on the channel, I am going to go over primer issues for the Lee Pro 1000. And the primer issues can be broken down into two categories. One, primer is missing in station 2, and that means that when your cartridge comes out, it looks good until you look at the bottom and it's missing a primer. So that's one category. The other category would be primers flipped or jamming in station 2. And you can see here it'd be an example of that one here where the primer got flipped and crushed in there. So I'm going to break these down into two issues and show you how to troubleshoot for both cases. The very first area you can look at when you don't have primers in your cartridge is, are the primers what's called bridged right here. They can form a little bridge here and not flow down. There are a couple different reasons for that. One, there's a pin here that's supposed to shake this whole mechanism here as it rides up and down. And you can see that it's going up and down and not shaking it very hard. When the press was first new, this was a really nice springy piece of plastic. Since then, time has aged this plastic and it's not as springy anymore. So I redesigned this pin, and I'll put a link to this down below if you want to do it. But this new shaker pin here, you can see, is a C shape, and it wraps around this pole and it's spring loaded. And you can see now they're going down, and of course sometimes you just need to tap them to get them going and to get them down. So that's a simple fix there. You either tap it every once in a while, or you can design your own spring. And like I said, I'll put a reference to this shaker pin down below. Another issue is when the primers come down the chute. You can see that this is an open system here, so you can see the primers in there. And it's right below, I don't have it on here, but the powder dispenser is here. And the powder dispensing system is kind of an open system, and little sprinkles of powder can drop off and fall into that chute. So you can take the primers off and get a fuzzy stick or a pipe cleaner or whatever you want to call it and clean this area out. Make sure all the dust is out of there. You can also get a little bit of compressed air, spray it out. That does a good job. If your chute is brand new from the factory, sometimes there are little tiny burrs left in there. So this can come out of here, and you can break this in half. And I took a 320 grit wet and dry sandpaper, sanded the inside of it here, so it made it nice and smooth. The other thing, if you're still not getting primers in here, here is your primer release pin. You could hear it just snap there when I did that. So that tells you it's working correctly. If you do this and it's not snapping, that means that this is not releasing your primers, and you need to take that apart and see why it's not snapping in there. The other issue I had is that you can see right here on Lee's instruction sheet, it says use only CCI or Remington brand primers. And in the perfect world, you can always buy everything you need, but over the past couple of years there have been a lot of shortages. So I did have to buy some primers once that were not recommended by Lee, and they were not nearly as slippery as a CCI, which the ones I use most of the time. So again, this is a gravity feed. So if your primers aren't nice and slippery, they're not going to slide down here. To remedy that fact, just a second. For the primers not sliding down in there because they weren't slippery enough, I designed a little, what I call a primer pusher. And when it goes up, it loads up this spring. And then when it comes down, it pushes the spring, pushes the primers down into there. And you can see here, there's a little finger here on this side. Let me get a bit, okay. You can see there's a little finger there, and that pushes the primers down into there. Okay, I'm going to go into the second area now. That's all that I'm going to cover on primers missing in Station 2. Now I'm going to go into primers flipped or jamming Station 2. The main reason for primers getting flipped or tossed around is positional accuracy. Obviously, if this indexing plate doesn't index correctly, this pin that pushes the primer into your case is not going to be in the right position. The major cause for this, and again, my press has over 12,000 rounds through it, so it's showing some signs of wear and tolerance slip. But the major cause for that is in the top of the head here. You can see that there's a round bearing insert. I put that bearing insert in there. The press does not come with a bearing insert. And so this action rod here can move all around. And when you come over to here, you can see that it moves that positioning plate all around. When I put this back in there with positioning bearing, now this action rod is held at the top, and that's not going anywhere. So that made a huge difference in this press. After I put this change in there, flips went to 0 and jams went to 0, and a press that was kind of frustrating to use became a lot of fun to use. And this press is really a joy to use, so that's a very important one. Putting the bearing up on top also solved another issue. Once in a while, when you had a case in Station 1, it would come up and bottom off to the side on the first forming die. Without that bearing in the top, it would allow this plate to tilt. Now that that plate doesn't tilt anymore, now that the plate doesn't tip anymore, when the cartridge comes up, it's a nice hit into that hole every time, and it isn't locking up the press. The other one here is another issue with the primers getting flipped. Again, positional accuracy. This little spring finger here, let me try to get a picture here. This little spring finger here holds the case in position. This spring finger had slid back here and wasn't holding the case in a correct position, and I was getting a lot of flipped errors there. I did create a permanent fix for this, so this spring finger can't slide anymore, and I'll put the link down below for that. Another issue, there's a detent ball here, and if you don't have this thing tuned in correctly, you can see how it's supposed to lock that in. You can hear it going click, the little detent ball. And there is a proper adjustment, and it's shown on the Lee website. I will put a link down below for them, and it shows their way for the correct way for this to line up. So if this isn't lining up nicely, obviously over here, this isn't going to line up, and this pin's going to come off at the side and flip that. The last issue that I have found on the press that can cause the primers to tip over here, again we're talking about positional accuracy, is this chute itself with time can be get kind of dried out and worn out and get a little bit twisted with age. And you can see here how easy it is for me to move this. When this was brand new, it was a beautifully tight fit in there. And you can see now it's moving around. The chute goes down into the bottom here, and it helps to locate the primer pusher pin down there. And I have fixed this primer chute. Instead of buying a new one, I just found a way to remachine the bottom of it so it fit in there nicely. And you can see now it's not moving that primer pin around. Before I fixed it, when I went like this, it would move that primer pin around. So I'll put a link below on a better way to check your primer chute to see if it is worn out. And that's all that I have on this one. Thanks for watching, and I hope this helps somebody.